Hello, and welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. In this episode, the entire world is falling apart, especially the one that surrounds me right now. It's called Gotham, also known as New York City. And our mayor here, Eric Adams, has been indicted on a slew of federal charges. Is this a politically motivated case? Might be. He also might be going away for a long, long time because the charges are pretty serious. There's like wire fraud, conspiracy, bribery, all sorts of things that typically the biggest city in the most powerful nation in the world, its leader probably doesn't want to get tagged with. Adam says that he's not resigning. He's being very stubborn. He is up for reelection next year. So now there's this big push on the left to have him forced out of office. Well, why would they do that? Why is AOC one of the people most vociferously coming out demanding Adams resign? Because her super progressive pal, Jermaine Williams, is the city's public advocate. Yes, that's a role that is voted upon in the city, and he won election for that in 2019 before the pandemic. And he would be acting mayor and then would have to call for a special election within 80 days of the day that he becomes kind of mayor. And he would essentially oversee things as a progressive, which is really scary because we see what progressives do to big cities. They are the ultimate status. They want to make the state as big and as powerful as possible. And then, in the name of freedom, they want to make sure that there is no punishment for people who are very violent and do horrible things to people who otherwise would love to could work freely in big cities like New York. So the city is essentially paralyzed because there have been people in Adams' orbit who have turned against him, cooperated with the federal government, and now you are seeing people who don't know whether or not they should defend Adams and try and get him to stay because there are aspects of his mayoralness that people have longed for in a city like this that really fell apart under Bill de Blasio, who was the mayor for 8 years here in New York. And he's just a big, dumb, lumbering giraffe. De Blasio left the city in such a horrible state. He was the one who worked with Anthony Fauci to keep the schools closed long after it was practical. And, for people like me, parents like me who had kids in New York City public schools, it was torturous. It was an extra year of hell when they didn't really need it. So bad ultra leftist progressive policies is something we could return to in pretty short order if Adams does in fact resign. He's a former cop. People like law and order candidates and mayors in New York City because it is a very tough place to govern. We ask a lot of our police force, so it's very helpful if the mayor is someone the police actually like, respect, and listen to, which they didn't under de Blasio because I don't know if you remember that ad, but he's like, my wife and I have to teach our son not to talk to cops because cops are going to target him because he's black. And it's like, all right, shut up. So cops hated de Blasio. They like Adams better, but now Adams may be forced out of office because these charges are so incredibly serious. And it's really not a good time. I don't know if you remember 9/11, but New York was, turns out, hit pretty hard. And, Giuliani was the mayor and he was very popular back then. It was before he started sweating brown. So New Yorkers know what happens when we have lapses in security and federal departments don't talk to each other and therefore don't talk to the police force. And you have people flying planes into buildings, killing thousands of innocent New Yorkers and people really from all over the world.
Don't go anywhere. More Kennedy Saves the World right after this.
So New Yorkers know that you don't want to be in a state where you are vulnerable because we have so many threats that exist already. So if you have a mayor who's got 1 foot in, 1 foot out with a paralyzed government, and you've got a president that doesn't know if his first name is oatmeal, Joe Biden, it's very problematic and very scary because, like I said, this is the biggest city in the country, and it requires a very sophisticated style of leadership. It requires a mayor who is able to talk very plainly to New Yorkers but also navigate the various unions, not just cops, it's teachers and, all the other manufacturing trades that exist and make this city run. Not to mention, the basic big city corrupt politics. Has Adams done that well? He's done better than de Blasio. But guess who might run if there is, in fact, a special election? And the math is very tight here because Jermaine Williams has to hold a special election within 80 days. But the actual election next year for mayor is June 2025. So you have to navigate that timeline. That means that the longer Adams holds out, the more likely it is that they're not going to have a special election. But if there is a special election, you know who wants to run? Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo, the groper who loves killing old people. And the reason he wants to run in a truncated period, obviously, is because they've got so many skeletons in his closet. They would have to retrofit entire industrial complexes to keep for his personal boneyard because there are so many women who would come forward and they would relitigate whatever it was that made him resign in shame. And then you have Janice Dean, Fox News weather senior meteorologist, both of her in-laws were killed when they were in nursing homes that were forced to take COVID positive patients. They had no immunity for it. They were, kind older people. They caught the disease and they both died alone because their families couldn't see them. They weren't allowed to be in the same room, and that was because of Andrew Cuomo. So she has made it her life's mission to remind people how deadly, reckless, and extremely careless his policies were. And we're also in this postmortem still learning more and more about how god awful he was as governor of New York State. And he wants to be mayor. He's got as good a shot as anybody because I don't think Adams is going to resign. I think he's going to stay in power as long as he possibly can. Is it what's best for New York? I guess, he's not Rod Blagojevich. So that's something for you. And he's the first mayor of New York City to be indicted on federal charges. And Chicago's looking at us like, rookies. What a bunch of idiots. So that's why Eric Adams was not given a plum speaking role at the Democrat National Convention, which normally the New York City mayor, if it's a Democrat, is. And he's gonna hang on to that just luscious power for as long as he possibly can. And the city will be worse off for it, but maybe not as bad as having a progressive commie running everything because we know how horrible that can get. We lived through the de Blasio years. We're still stuck with the AOC. We're haunted by Weiner. I'm not talking about my prom night. I'm talking about Anthony Weiner, who also tried to run for mayor of New York City. And you know what? They might dust off the Wiener. If Cuomo's going to run, Weiner is probably just aching and throbbing at another shot to run this once beautiful city and be the most powerful mayor in all the land. That's a hard one to swallow. All right, this has been Kennedy Saves the World.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.
Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.